A new world order is currently on the rise, and currently, almost all news media stations are covering its day-to-day highlights. We are speaking of BlackRock, which is the largest financial institution in the world. They self-proclaim themselves as a new world order as 2022 went down. You may have seen it and most probably got convinced that everything will change for the better, that you will owe nothing and that you will love it. What has really amazed us is how BlackRock plans on seeing this. Unfortunately, almost everyone is blind to this. To our side, we think that the plan isn't what you are thinking about. So, what is it? Join us today as we unveil the great secrecy behind the plan. Before we get deeper into the story, let's travel back to March 2021, when the Russian troops started lining up on the Ukrainian border, preparing for what Putin calls routine military exercises. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers had already made their way toward the west, all under the guise of training. On October 2021, Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of the Security Council of Russia, published an article claiming that Ukraine is a vassal of the West and that the weak, ignorant and unreliable country is not worthy of dialogue, lay under the pretext of what was to come. On December 2021, Western intelligence agencies such as the CIA and the MI6 started to report suspicions of a full-scale invasion. February 2022 was the beginning of a dark nightmare for the Ukrainians as the Russian troops crossed the border, with guns blazing, and what erupted is the greatest conflict Europe has ever seen since the end of the Second World War. Devastation and destruction looped across Ukraine as thousands of soldiers died on both sides, and also civilians getting terrorized by a conflict, which they considered unthinkable. Days passed and March 2022 came by, but still, the Ukrainians didn't give up on the fight. Now, here marks the beginning of what we will be covering today about how things didn't get to glitch as was expected. Larry Fink, the CEO and founder of BlackRock, one of the most powerful men in the world, writes a letter to his investors. To some extent, you might think that he was focused on market oil prices, supply chain disruptions and inflations that emerged as the war started. He spoke as though he was the mouthpiece of the Joe Biden administration. He stated, "I speak for everyone at BlackRock when I say that witnessing Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been truly heartbreaking. We stand with the Ukrainian people who have shown true heroism in the face of merciless aggression." Also, on April 2022, Alex Brazier, BlackRock's Investment Institute deputy, went on to Bloomberg TV and talked about Ukraine of all things, but he got an angle, so he pushed it hard. The overarching message of this appearance in globalization is dead. The economy of the world as we know it, where the gas comes from Russia, it's burned in a factory in Germany, so a product can be shipped to Vietnam, assembled in China, and then sold in America. Well, that's all over. Later that year, on September 2022, President Vladimir Zelensky met with Larry Fink, the CEO and founder of BlackRock. Now, the question is, what was the reason for their meeting? Let's proceed and you'll get a clue of what happened ahead in this video. Meanwhile, in November of 2022, the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine and BlackRock met again to talk the catch-up and plan about the future. And this time they signed and released a Memorandum of Understanding, agreeing on a framework for consultative assistance in developing a special platform to attract private capital for the recovery and support of Ukraine's economy. Just a few days later, and BlackRock put out a press release titled BlackRock Financial Markets Advisory to advise the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine, confirming that the deal had been accepted and BlackRock and Ukraine would be working together. On December 2022, President Vladimir Zelensky meets again with the CEO of BlackRock, discussing their cooperation, and even planned a trip for BlackRock's leaders to visit Ukraine in 2023. They also discussed how Ukraine will be rebuilt after the war is over, and notably how BlackRock would be responsible for the whole thing. On January 2023, the Ukrainian and BlackRock delegates met at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and that is when the real lobbying began. The Ukrainian officials, without wasting much time on ammunition or additional intelligence, jumped into what they had in their minds all along. They asked for financial support to help rebuild Ukraine before the war was even over. From the meeting, the estimated budget was to be $1 trillion. So, what the United States did was to develop a Marshall Plan. We all know the United States is a country that has seen its industry and economy boom and made billions from selling arms around the world. The Marshall Plan was designed to provide economic assistance to Europe to help the continent rebuild and recover. This ended up being widely successful as some of the money sent to Europe was loaned, and it was all repaid, which made up for a nice investment on America's behalf. Even the money sent in the form of grants or free money ended up making the US richer. You might be definitely left wondering, how did giving away money make the United States wealthier? Well, it opened a great market for Americans, such that their firms could easily export to and trade with European nations. This is exactly what seems to be going on in Ukraine currently. The only difference here is that it is not the American government involved, but a most powerful company that has formed the basis of our story today. America has held a long history of rebuilding nations destroyed during warfare. Iraq is just one of the most recent examples. It has grown to be one of the largest customer bases for the entire Arab world. It has one of the largest oil supplies and the best educated workforces in the region. With time, the United States started seeing Iraq as a business opportunity, and this returned them to a state of political instability again to date. It is undoubtedly right that Ukraine also has a high potential of heading in the same direction, but this time it may be just one of the worst, as it will cost Ukraine thousands of lives and, on the other side, fill the pockets of politicians, lobbyists and corporations. This is a sad truth that Ukrainians must live to accept. Why do I say so? Going back to August 2022, a BlackRock managing director and executive called Eric von Nostrand was hired straight into the Biden administration, and his job title was to be a senior advisor on economic issues tied to Russia and Ukraine. This came after Biden had already hired two BlackRock executives, Brian Deese and Mike Pyle, immediately after winning the presidential elections. The biggest fear here is that BlackRock positioned itself to profit from the destruction in Ukraine, and also ensure that there is destruction in Ukraine. The BlackRock lobbyists, who are now very powerful figures within the American government, not only push for more sanctions against Russia, but also push for more weapons to be poured into Ukraine. In short, we can say that they are removing Ukraine from the pan now into the real fire, and the fact here is that it won't be easy for them to get out of this mess. This will keep the war burning as the BlackRock lobbyists keep on gaining profits from the military-industrial complex. One thing about BlackRock is that they own more than $40 billion worth of United States manufacturers. They own 16% of weapon makers Sturm Ruger & Company, 6% of Lockheed Martin, 5% of Boeing, and 4% of General Dynamic, 7% of Raytheon, and lastly 6% of Northrop Grumman. So we hope you're already seeing the dark side here. Since BlackRock is a major shareholder of all these companies, you can sense the huge amounts of profits they're getting from the Russian-Ukraine war that happened last year and even still occurring today. Now the question here is, how did they make these profits? Let's first start from their business side. As it happens, these companies also had the rights, just like any other company, to sell weapons to the Ukrainians. With that, they highly boosted their profits, as well as BlackRock's, which is one of their biggest shareholders. Secondly, the BlackRock organization earned big money in a very dark way. You can state it this way. Every time there were headlines of the Russian missile hitting a vital energy infrastructure in Ukraine, knocking out electricity in over 1 million homes, BlackRock would know they have $100 million already deposited in their banks. And this goes all the way for any crime committed by Russia to Ukraine. BlackRock would always benefit from it. From the general reality of this, it is not best to argue about how much the war on Ukraine has cost the country. Put it in around trillions of dollars, which means that BlackRock would be receiving around $4 billion per week. Ukraine is therefore going to see every loan that Ukraine takes out, and paying it back has to be through BlackRock. Comparatively speaking, we are talking about the rebuilding of any infrastructure that has been destroyed during the war in Ukraine, from businesses, civil infrastructure, electronics, and many more. A message to you all: don't even wait for the war to end, because Ukraine is already pushing for this investment even now. So many representatives have been sent to Davos to the World Economic Forum because it is the greatest concentration of fortune. Talk of 500 CEOs, world leaders and hedge funds the world has ever seen. Put it, they are profiting from every destruction now, and they'll continue profiting from it even in the future. In conclusion, we can rightly put that BlackRock is an organization that does not have good or bad intentions. Its only focus is on how it can make money, and not trying to solve the situation. What do you think? Do you think that BlackRock can ever be withdrawn from helping out Ukraine? Please don't forget to leave your suggestions in the comment section below. We hope you guys found this video informative and especially entertaining. If you loved watching, please don't forget to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching, and let's meet in the next video.